Welcome to the ultimate NBA season preview. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste, and in this 6-episode series, we'll go around the NBA, getting insight and analysis from all 30 of our Locked On NBA shows with local coverage in a way no one else can. So in this episode, episode 3, Jake Madison joins us from Locked On Pelicans, Joe Mullinax, Locked On Grizzlies, Doug Norris, Locked On Nets, Nick Angstadt, Locked On Mavs, and Sean Woodley, Locked On Raptors. So Nick, we'll start with you. The Mavericks ended last season in a terrible way. It's kind of tough going out for Dallas. How will they be different this season?
Oh, hopefully a lot different this season, because last season was just one of the dumbest, worst seasons I've seen in a long time, the way that the Mavs went out. You only had 16 games with Luka and Kyrie. They only played 4 straight games together twice. Like, they basically just played every other game. They were hurt at the end of the season. Their defense was already bad in the season, and then it got worse after the trade, and it just crumbled all the way down to the studs. They tanked the last 2 games, which was a great move because they ended up getting the draft pick that became Derek Lively, that became Omax Prosper, and became Rashawn Holmes, now all on the team and all have a chance to play here for the Dallas Mavericks. So they added a bunch of new guys. There's a ton of new faces for the Mavericks. Grant Williams is going to be big for their culture as well as their defense and their shooting. Seth Curry comes in. He's going to help their shooting. Their rookies that are coming in. Derek Lively may start for this team. Like, he's going to start in preseason. We'll see what happens with him going forward. But this team should be a lot different just because they're starting with everybody here. They're not like trying to create something in the middle of a season. And Luka and Kyrie still good, still won their minutes when they were on the court. They just got to figure out how to win minutes when one of them is off the court.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point that you make, because that's kind of, it's like a true, like a hard reset, if you will. Whereas if I look at the Pelicans, not exactly, Jake, a hard reset, but a reset in some way nonetheless, because of Zion Williamson and kind of the in and outs, if you will, from last season. And of course, the eventful summer, we'll call it eventful. So when you look at Zion's health, where does his health stand, and kind of where does he stand with all that off the court stuff?
Yeah, you look at this Pelicans team, and it seems like they're just kind of running everything back, and it's kind of business as usual, but it's actually really far from that. And we can get to Zion here in a second with it, but they made a lot of changes behind the scenes. They've revamped their player performance and care team. They've dealt with a ton of injuries, not just to Zion Williamson, but even a guy like Brandon Ingram, who missed 29 straight games at one point last season, right? Health has always been the problem for the Pelicans, and this is the first year in 5 years that they've made some significant changes to try and maybe just get player buy-in a little bit more, keep these guys healthier, because on paper, they're a very talented team. They just got to stay healthy, and that's been impossible for them. I think that also applies to Zion Williamson. Something woke him up this offseason, whether it was being kind of in the press for a lot of the wrong reasons, and that's putting it very mildly. He's also, what started all this is going to be having a daughter in November, and maybe that's caused him to mature a little bit. But at Media Day, on Monday, he spoke about how he's hired new trainers to be with him, a nutritionist, a personal trainer. He spent the entire offseason in New Orleans working out at the team facility, which is the first time that he's ever done that. He talked about wanting to build a better relationship with the team, that he's just kind of like finally being an actual professional NBA player in a way that he hasn't been before. So all of those changes to me, I think, are pretty significant. And if it means he can be healthy during the season, this team's good. They were first in the West in December when he was healthy, and they didn't even have Brandon Ingram. They had a top 6 offense with him out there, a top 5 defense, one of the few teams that could look at that, be that way for a period of time. If he can stay healthy, this team's still going to be really good, and that's kind of what they're banking on, and everyone's saying and doing all the right things right now.
No one asked Jake why Zion woke up. No one asked Jake.
Probably afraid to.
We don't need the show to get banned from YouTube quickly.
Yeah, and we can't go off the rails that early, right, guys? But speaking of off the rails and probably needing to get back on the rails at some point is Ja Morant. Joe, of course, he is suspended for 25 games. So that's certainly something that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show, because that's important as far as the pecking order in the Western Conference, right? But swinging back over to the East, Sean, Pascal Siakam was Mr. Popularity this offseason, right? It seemed like every team every day was in the whole Pascal Siakam rumor mill. So this summer, rumors, will he stay? Will he go? Well, of course, so far, he stayed in Toronto. So what do you think the long-term plan is for him and the Raptors?
I have about as much an idea of this as the Raptors seem to after Media Day today, where Masai Ujiri and Pascal Siakam both seemed like very much not on the same page, which is exactly where you want to be to start a new season, with your best player and your front office head not really being on the same page. It's great. Everything's fine. There's no problems here to see. Everything's going to be great. New coach, great vibes. It's cool. Yeah, it was a strange summer for the Raptors, right? And I think, some of the changes could be good. Nick Nurse got let go at the end of the season. I think it was just time to end that relationship. It just really seemed to sour very quickly by the end of last season, just like milk sitting out in the sun. It just like, oh, okay, that's bad. No thanks. And they ended that. And I think that was the right move. I think Darko Rajakovic comes in as a pretty interesting new head coach prospect. Obviously, he's never coached before. That's the sort of thing with a coach, is you never really know how they're going to do in the job until they're in the job. But, as far as vibes on Media Day, Darko Rajakovic was the only guy really putting out the good ones. It seems like everyone's very happy with Darko. He seems to really kind of have a good sort of knack for communicating with the players. He's going to, shockingly run more than 7 players on a given night, like Nick Nurse just simply could not keep himself from doing last season. That's very exciting. But it all does come back to Pascal sign a contract right now for near $200 million over 4 years if the Raptors want to. And you would think that your 2-time All-NBA player who you can go extend right now would just have an offer to go extend, but it does not seem like that's coming anytime soon. And when you couple that with losing Fred VanVleet for nothing in the offseason, which, look, you couldn't go and pay him what the Rockets did, right? $43 million a year for Fred VanVleet. Good for Fred. Happy he got that, but you could not possibly do that if you're the Raptors. But you lose him for nothing after seemingly thinking you had a pretty good shot at keeping him. They misread that market. And now you come into this year, not just with Pascal Siakam as a pending UFA, but OG Anunoby has a player option at the end of the season that he's absolutely going to decline. And Gary Trent Jr. is a free agent as well after opting into the last year of his contract in the summer. And that just has this big sort of awkward question hanging over the entire team is, all right, 3 of your 5 most important players are not under contract beyond this year. What's the plan here? What's the direction? Are they going to sign deals before the season starts? And I'm not expecting that's going to happen with Pascal. And I think that kind of speaks to a bit of a mismanagement of the relationship between the Raptors and their best player. And we got no closer to any sort of clarity on Media Day. It's going to be fascinating to see if we see some sort of offer, but I'm not holding my breath at this point. And I think it just kind of speaks to the general state of disrepair that the Raptors kind of seem to be in.
Yeah, I would say the same. They're kind of one of those, I like to say, Sean, like a middling organization, because there are times when you can have them in the conversation of kind of, I'll say the big 3, obviously the Bucks and the Celtics, and depending on which year it is, it could be the Heat, it could be the Bulls, it could be the Raptors. So they've been up there, and then they've also been at the bottom of the Eastern Conference kind of, and they've been in the middling kind of, we don't know if we're the contenders or the pretenders. And then they've also been at the bottom of the barrel, kind of scratching their way even into the play-in tournament. So yeah, very intriguing what this roster is going to look like and where this Raptors team goes from here.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how that team, like, where it ends up by the end of the season. They have like no guards. You guys had no guards last year. You had no guards last year, Sean, and somehow you have less guards going into this season. Is it just Scotty Barnes and Dennis Schroeder, and like you're just gonna say, hey, let's just figure it out?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's pretty grim, man. I mean, there's a reason the Raptors were very much on the Damian Lillard, sweepstakes train, right? Like, I think that was very real interest, and I do think they had like a real offer on the table. I know they get clowned because they quote unquote wouldn't offer OG Anunoby. I don't think it's as simple as that, because I don't think if OG's in that trade that the DeAndre Ayton to Portland thing happens, and I think they prioritize that. And I just think Portland probably thought they could get more for Drew Holiday than OG Anunoby at this current point in their careers, and the sort of what contenders are looking for. And so, that, is a whole other thing. But yeah, like wanting Damian Lillard suggests that they do realize that guard play is important, in fact, and that pull-up shooting is like a valuable thing to have in 2023. It's shocking when you look at the roster how little of that there exists here. There's a pathway to this team being decent. I think their defense actually profiles to be pretty awesome, and I think playing a more conservative style than they played last year. Remember Nick Nurse ball, where it's like, good players, send 2 guys there and figure out the rest and get, a barrage of threes by role players put on your head. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. I think they're going to be a pretty conservative defense with like really good defensive players top to bottom in their lineup. I think that's going to drive them, but the offense is going to be a real challenge, and not having a pull-up shooting guard threat at all in this team is going to put a ton of pressure on Scotty Barnes to tap back into the mid-range game that totally fell off a cliff for him last year. It's going to ask Dennis Schroeder to be FIBA Dennis Schroeder and not Dennis Schroeder, who we've known for 10 years. And like, look, was awesome for Germany this year. He's been that awesome for Germany for the last 10 years in international play, and is still Dennis Schroeder in the NBA. So if you're thinking, oh, FIBA MVP, he's actually an upgrade. No, he's not. He's just like a fine 6th man in a perfect world. It's a really, really strange basketball team. I don't know what's going on. Up is down, east is west, whatever. It's going to be a very strange year in Toronto, no doubt.
Yeah, strange is probably a nice way to put it. And, Doug, you could kind of say the same for the Nets, because it's kind of an interesting place where this was a team that within the last year or two was at the top of the sort of the food chain for the East, right? And everyone's thinking, okay, you've got Kyrie Irving, you've got Kevin Durant, like this should be instant kind of add water, mix, become champions. Didn't quite happen that way. So now this team finds itself really kind of maybe building around Mikal Bridges. But I was wondering, from your perspective, just being so close to the team, do you feel like they can actually build around him, or is there a plan to maybe get another foundational centerpiece?
Well, I think if the Nets owned their own draft picks going into this year, the Nets would be in a different podcast group here. They wouldn't be in the What Are we wouldn't be in the What Are We group. We'd be in the On the Rise or What's Next group. I think. Yeah. I think that's I can say that pretty definitively. But because they don't own their picks, they're in this very weird middle ground right now, where there's no incentive to tank, and they don't have probably the talent to be with some of the other teams in the East, and they're stuck in this weird middle ground. I think it's going to be, it's definitely what we've been referring to it as a gap year, in that it's let's just see what else we can produce from some of the young guys that they brought in from the offseason. Clearly, they have one of the best contracts in basketball with Mikal Bridges. I mean, he showed that he is if not already a star, will probably be considered very much a star by the end of this season, with the increased usage and efficiency and really everything he's been able to do. The problem is beyond him. It's sometimes you have to squint to see it, where the talent is going to come from, where the scoring is going to come from. And, we can talk Ben Simmons. There are some other different angles here. Simmons probably being the next guy up in terms of question marks around what the team becomes, probably hinges on what he's able to come back and do or not do, depending. But the Nets find themselves in a very, very weird position right now. It's unenviable, because most times with this group, you would easily just say full reset time. We have Bridges. Let's see where we are in 2 years. We'll tank, and we'll grab some picks. But because they can't do that with the Houston picks, because of the Harden deal, they just are going to enter a season where I really think they're going to be fighting for the play-in. So it's really not the spot you want to be in terms of organizational sort of building, but it's where they are, and their future looks bright with some of the picks that they have. But I do think that this could be a season that it could be a slog at times, and that's one of my major concerns, just looking up and down the roster.
Coming up, what are the expectations for these teams? But first, snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. And listen, you can visit FanDuel.com and include their money lines, their props, so many opportunities there. And look, the NFL season is a great example of a topsy-turvy season where you probably need some good insight to help you to make the right bet. So again, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season with the official partner of the NFL. Doug, I feel like, just like we were talking about earlier, that's kind of the signature or kind of the mantra for the Eastern Conference. It's like you have one or two powerhouses and maybe three, and it goes up and down, right, on who they are besides like the Bucks and Celtics. But it seems like the rest of the teams on any given day can be either at the kind of bottom, like 3-4, the top four. They could be in the middle, or they could slide very much to the bottom, and we never quite know which team at what point is going to be where in the pecking order in the East.
In the range of outcomes, there is a version of the Nets that can exceed, probably like get into some, higher percentile outcome and be okay. It's just that their margin for error is much smaller than a lot of these other teams, just because there is a talent drop off, even with a full Simmons comeback season, 2019 Simmons. No one says better media day vibes than Simmons. But you gotta wait to see it, right? So
my guy had to go.
Siakam has words for you, baby.
I was like, has Ben Simmons learned to shoot yet?
My guy had to go. This is what I mean. Pre-pandemic year to find the Ben Simmons year that would work.
Everything was fine last year, and then he does the interview this summer where I was like, I was hurt all season. It's like, well, okay, so this is why you have to wait and see it, right? You just can't. I never want to do this because I just don't think it's good process in any evaluation. But the Nets do represent for me one of those. I just have to see what happens literally in the first preseason game, and then to begin formulating some more of my opinions, because until that happens, you just don't know. And I think that's usually a really bad thing to make any evaluation on, because it's just too short-sighted and it just doesn't allow for enough, there's not enough heuristics to really kind of like formulate a good opinion. In this case, though, that's like, there are so many different ways things could go. Like Simmons could look amazing. Cam Thomas is the sixth man. There's just like weird things that can happen, but that Simmons could be on the bench and Cam Thomas could be on the rotation. Like, these are just two things that could happen. I don't know. I just need to see. I just need to see it for a couple games in, because there are a massive amount of question marks for a team that doesn't have enough talent to like really dream super huge on what they could become.
Can I ask, like, how are the Nets approaching Ben Simmons right now? Like, are they touting him as like he's gonna start, he's back, like he's the guy? Like, what are they planning on doing with him?
That was a quick no right there.
It's ready.
They seem to be already maybe at odds around that. And everyone's done a good kumbaya job here of going into the season and saying sort of all the right things. Like, Simmons has said all the right things. Okay, congrats. And Vaughn has said all the right things. They've admitted that in the past they barely even spoke last year. So that we'll
nice.
File that into the
That's
not amazing
good
category, right? So, and then, but even now, it's Simmons has said he wants to start. There's been no clear sign that that's going to happen from the Nets organization. No one said it isn't going to happen, but no one has said he is the starter, and even like I mentioned Cam Thomas, and I don't think he's a huge linchpin player, but even he at media day mentioned something along the lines of like, well, I'm not sure exactly what my role is. Right? It's like, okay, season kind of starts soon. So maybe it'd be great if everyone knew what they were going in. I think this is just sort of the theme of what the Nets have run the last couple of years is there are too many question marks. Sometimes the players seem to have question marks around what's going on. The hope was that this would not be the case going into this year. It's not started off perfectly along these lines. And again, this is why honestly, one or two preseason games might tell a lot of the story about what the plan is, but no one has actually put pen to paper and said, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Doug, I got a question for you, and this kind of applies to Sean too. Like, is there any heat then on the front office for kind of all of the turnover with star players that they've had, bringing these guys in, making these deals, then shipping them out, then bringing other ones, shipping them out? The draft pick situation, you look at their future draft picks, is just bizarre a little bit for the next couple of years. But Sean, maybe you can answer this after. Yep. Same with like Ujiri, right? Like, he seems notoriously difficult to deal with all of that. Will they trade Anunoby during last season's trade deadline? And he was one of the hottest names, and like nothing materialized at all with that. Like, do they look at making changes to the front office on both these teams?
I can answer this one pretty quickly. Sean Marks seems like he is made of absolute Teflon when it comes. There are very few GMs that would be on their third coach and their fourth iteration of the team and still have full sort of like immunity around whatever is going on. That just never happens. Again, like you could usually mark this stuff by coaching changes. It's like, hey, you get a couple bites of the coaching apple, and on your third one, maybe it's you, right? Like so maybe it's not the coach, maybe it's you. And yeah, I think he gets helped a little bit that the Harden stuff and the Kyrie stuff look not as bad in a vacuum because, I mean, clearly Harden seems like a head case here. What's going on? Or just, okay, let a head case. It looks like they might not be the easiest guys ever to deal with. So maybe there's a mea culpa there. But I'm with you. I'm shocked that there's not more discussion about a regime change just because the last thing went so bad and you engineered it. So I just don't, and I just don't understand it. But there is no hint that job is anything but rock solid safe. And I just think if it was almost any other regime, there'd be major questions about it, but no one seems, that just never comes up. And that's where we talked about it many times. And it's very head scratching to me.
And on the Raptors, I think Masai Ujiri has a pretty long runway. I mean, he's won a title. He turned the Raptors from the Toronto Raptors into a perennial 50-win team and won a title. I think he's got a lot of grace here, but I also think it is starting to get a little hot, right? Like he just lost Fred VanVleet for nothing. You know, you talk about the OG Anunoby, will he, won't he trade and all that stuff. Like part of that I get. Also, part of it, I think, is maybe like we get too juiced up. Everyone has to make trades. That's how you be a good GM. Like, I don't necessarily think that has to be true. Like, I see the stat going around. Oh, the Raptors have the fewest transactions in the last 3 seasons. It's like, okay, fine. It's not like it's not like you're trying to gain points by doing transactions. That's
the
not
Spurs used to lead that every single year when they were in their dynasty with Duncan.
Exactly, right. So I don't think that's like a determinant of success, but I do think there's a lot riding on this season for the Raptors, and if they lose Pascal Siakam for nothing, if they lose OG Anunoby for nothing, when going into the season with these pending UFAs, having just lost Fred for nothing last summer, I don't think it's necessarily all linked. Like they could totally keep Pascal and OG. They have a track record of keeping their guys, but if they lose those guys, I don't know how you look at it as anything other than a massive failure, considering Fred, OG, and Pascal were basically like the pillars of the Masai Ujiri era when it came to development, when it came to late draft picks, when it came to guys who were backbone pieces of not just the title team, but the post-championship era as well. And so they have to get this right, whatever that is. They have to hope this Darko Rajakovic hire works out, and they really have to hope Scotty Barnes becomes the star everybody thinks he can be, because if not, you're sitting here with a pick out the door for Jakob Poeltl, who doesn't really fit very well with the best players on the team as a non-shooter, fits even less well with Fred VanVleet not around. Like, of course you have to start looking at the decision-making process and say, hey, what's going on here? Masai, it's a weird case with him because he has sort of cachet beyond basketball, right? Like he is just sort of like a figurehead for the franchise that I think they are very happy to have in that figurehead role. He's like a very sort of inspiring leader. He has lots of philanthropic stuff, Giants of Africa, Basketball Africa, all this stuff. Like I think they like having that part of the portfolio of the Toronto Raptors, as it were, but Bobby Webster, the GM, like he's totally, I think, very much on the table if things go poorly this year. And you never know, the powers that be, who own the Raptors. It's not like a single individual owner. It's a giant conglomerate boardroom at MLSE. If they start to realize, hey, things aren't going so hot here with the Raptors, this is supposed to be one of our easy money tickets, and this is not going very well, then I think they could certainly start to look at Masai Ujiri and a change at the top. Like I don't think we're far off, if we're not already there, from a lot of fans feeling like, hey, this is kind of time to start looking at some change. I have a hard time advocating to fire Masai Ujiri because I don't think you're finding another Masai Ujiri out there, but it's certainly, there's an argument to say that 10 years into his tenure that maybe things are getting a little bit stale.
God, what would that be like to not have a figurehead owner that would just go on every podcast that exists and just like always talk and say things and man, like try to get set up his players with dates with Taylor Swift? Like what would that be like? I have no clue.
It has its ups and downs, right? Like, I feel like there's positives to both situations. There's no Tillman Fertitta running rogue at MLSE, but there's the odd board member, I'm sure, who's got Tillman's inclinations, just doesn't quite get to put those on display for the world to see.
I bet your conglomerate doesn't follow you on Twitter, Sean.
I think the conglomerate is Twitter and is everything that we consume in Canada, considering it's the two telecom companies that run the entire country that own the team. Yeah, we're doing great up here in Canada. It makes perfect sense.
So if Sean's internet gets throttled at some point during this, you can blame it on the ownership conglomerate.
Exactly. We know why. So I think Sean and Doug kind of tapped into this a little bit with it's a head scratcher for them as far as what the expectations might be for the Raptors and Nets. So Nick and Jake, I'll start with you guys as far as expectations from your perspective. Nick, what's the expectation for this Mavs team this season? And then Jake, how about the same for the Pels?
Oh, the expectation for the Mavericks is to just make the playoffs again. Just be a playoff team. At least for me, I'm sure there are expectations from fans that are a lot higher that'll say, well, you've got to win a playoff series. It's just so hard in the West right now. Everything's just so up in the air. Health is so up in the air. I don't know what's going to happen. My expectation is just get back in the playoffs. Be a top 6 team. Be, a play-in team maybe that can get into they can get into the playoffs, just make it back, right the ship. Doug keeps talking about a gap year. I feel like Sean has kind of talked about this as a gap year. I feel like it's kind of a gap year for the Mavericks in the sense that you've just got to figure out what you have. You've got to figure out what Luka and Kyrie are. You've got to figure out which of these young guys, which of these role players, Josh Green, Grant Williams, Seth Curry, Derek Lively, you've got to figure out which one of these guys can be part of your building blocks moving forward. And then you build on that from there. They're I don't know. They're 3 or 4 really good moves from being a title contender, but they've got to be really good moves. And you've got to nail some of these guys. They've got to be good early. And so, yeah, that's the expectation for the Mavericks right now.
Nick, are we just assuming Kyrie Irving is going to be normal for a season of basketball? That feels dangerous.
Doug, we just had media day.
I was going to ask you. I was going to jump in and ask what your threat level midnight here is on Kyrie Irving here.
Threat level 5 a.m. Just woke up, feeling great. It's Kyrie just said, I wish that this team and this organization would have drafted me. I wish I could spend my whole career with this organization. Jake just rolled his eyes, the biggest I've ever seen. We're in the weird honeymoon phase where the wedding just went awful. It was terrible, but it was not the bride's fault. It was not their fault at all that anything went wrong. And now we're in this weird honeymoon where we went to a foreign country and our money wouldn't transfer over. And we're just and so now I don't know when it goes bad. I'm just kind of sitting here waiting. If you would have just listened to my sit down interview with Kyrie at Media Day and just watched that, you would have no idea that guy went through a national controversy last year and the year before that with all these different things. And couldn't play home games.
Pluralized that we're looking for here, not just.
Also, nice little flex of my sit down interview with Kyrie Irving that I just
literally talked to Zion today. You could do this. You could do the same thing. But
I was planning on when I talk about the expectations.
I know you were, and I'll call you out the same way. But we're in the honeymoon phase where it feels like he's settled in. He is 31 now. He's got 3 kids. Maybe he signed a deal. He got the deal that he wanted. And I feel like the two things that are different from his stops in the past, the things that will come back to haunt me later if it does, is the Mavericks know him. Jason Kidd was his favorite player growing up. Nico Harrison's known him since he was in high school. They have this history with all of them, that whole group. The Mavericks front office went to Kyrie and asked him for his input on some of the moves they made. He really was a proponent for Grant Williams to come on this team. They went out and got Grant Williams. There's a connection there that I think he didn't have in the past. They gave him the deal that he wanted. He got a player option at the end of that deal, which may not look very good on the surface, but if it keeps Kyrie happy and keeps Kyrie in a spot where he's going to play basketball and continue to stay on the team, then hey, you pay it and then you hope that it works because they've made this decision. They've taken this risk and now they've just got to deal with it at this point.
So my hot take here is I actually think and I've spent thousands of hours just talking about this guy in the last couple of years.
I've listened to them.
I actually think it's going to work. I actually am one of the few people that is going to say, I actually think at least for a season, it is going to work. And he will be
quite the bar to clear.
I know. Okay, let me put it differently. I think he's going to be awesome. Like, I think he's going to be, I won't even just say good. I don't think I'll go beyond. He'll just be normal. I think he's going to be awesome for the year.
He was an all-star starter last year. He was good last year.
No, but Doug said the whole season. That's the critical piece of what Doug is saying.
I think it's a whole season. I think it's multiple seasons. I think he has it in him to do this. I think that I won't say much. I think there's a definite weird vibe from him for sure. And I think there's times where he talks where my eyes physically can't roll any farther into the back of my head. But I do think he has it in him to turn it on here in a situation that he probably does see as positive. I doubt he's lying about that. And so I actually think that there was a weird part of his thing, but there was also this like sort of a lot of very weird circumstances, that some of by which were his fault and some were not. And I just think he pulls it together and it's just like puts together a crazy statistical awesome season.
We have to say it's a big difference between Brooklyn in New York and here in Texas. Like I kind of feel like that's going to be a big.
That might be a starting point. Yeah, just the atmosphere, like, Southwest versus Northeast. Coming up, what questions do these teams need to answer? But first, recently I was trying my best to get to the Renaissance tour, right? And I had a little bit of a challenge with my tickets. And right about now, getting Braves tickets, what a frustrating experience. But you can get around some of those things if you're like me and you try to get the tickets on the cheap last minute. We got something for you, and that is Gametime. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. LOCKEDONNBA. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Joe entered the chat, so I want to bring him into the show and kind of talk a little bit about the Grizzlies, kind of get you caught up, Joe, because, hey, look, I know inquiring minds want to know, including this inquiring mind, about sort of where the Grizzlies are, because, it's a weird place to start the season because you won't have Ja Morant for those first 25 games. So it's kind of, where's that organization right now in terms of preparing for life without Ja, and kind of who you see needs to step up to keep the Grizzlies in the conversation as far as the top of the West?
We suspended Joe for the first 20 minutes of this episode.
He just didn't want to come on. He's standing in solidarity with Ja Morant here.
No, I thought about just boycotting it entirely because I was put in the "what are we" category, and I think I stand for DeMichael Cole, my co-host, and I when I say we reject that statement. And no offense to the people that are also here, very talented hosts of their various Locked On shows. I would say the Grizzlies are a contender in the NBA.
FanDuel did not.
Yeah, well, FanDuel has them, I think, like eighth in the odds and that sort of thing. And, I think...
Which playoff round did they lose in last year?
They lost in the first round, but thankfully that doesn't have anything to do with this coming season. Otherwise, that would mean the Pelicans would not make the playoffs at all. And they would,
shots fired.
Watch it off to the side. But that's probably what's going to happen anyway. I think that if you look at this Grizzlies team, it starts and ends with Morant, but I also think that this Grizzlies team, for the first time in the Ja Morant era, made moves with their eyes to the playoffs. And that's probably, and I was, subtle joking there. I think that the Grizzlies are in a fair place in terms of what are they because of that reality, because they're acting like a contending team for the first time. It was the first time in the Zach Kleiman era as GM that they went out and they gave up first round picks to bring in someone like Marcus Smart.
Yeah.
It was the first time that they made moves in the offseason that looked like a contending team actually looks. So DeMichael Cole, my co-host, and I, we're kind of in the same boat. We're not quite sure what we're going to get, because whether it's the first 25 games without Ja, that was revealed today that Morant's going to be with the team the entire time, which is phenomenal for the Grizzlies. I don't know how much it's going to help Ja Morant. Tune in to Locked On Grizzlies for that conversation.
Hey.
But it helps the Grizzlies a ton, and it allows for them to hit the ground running when he does return. But the biggest question for them is usually around Christmas time, you have a good vibe for assuming health and all that sort of stuff, who your team is. Because Morant's going to be out so long, you're not going to know that until closer to the trade deadline. So the Grizzlies still have all their first-round picks. They still have multiple tradable contracts. They could make a move for somebody if they wanted to, but we have no idea what this team's going to look like until much later in the season, and that really does limit our prognostication as to where they align in the current standings of the NBA.
Yeah, but one of the good things, Joe, is, and I'll just kind of put a nice spin on it, not having Ja for the 25 games might just bring a healthy Ja. And so as you get deeper into the season and going into the postseason, that's where the Grizzlies might actually get a lift from not having him. So that said, I think you make a great point as well. Maybe getting a Marcus Smart is more playing chess and not checkers when you look at what the Western Conference is about. So you get him after 25 games, you're getting close to the trade deadline. You still have the ability to do some things. Kind of where do you expect this team to be when it's all said and done at the end of the season?
I think that the first 25 games, everybody on this roundtable is going to be making fun of me because they're going to be about 10. They're going to be about 10 and 15. Well, I said this recently on another podcast. The thing about Tyus Jones is he was an excellent starter and a not good reserve, right? Like Tyus Jones was not good as the true backup to Morant. He was a good substitute teacher, I like to say. So I think Tyus Jones is going to have a great season with the Washington Wizards because he was a good starter for the Grizzlies. However, Marcus Smart, for those that watch, and I know I got a couple of Eastern Conference friends on here, Smart playing true point guard is not great. And I'm not really looking forward to that in these first 25 games. So I could see Memphis being like 10 and 15, the first 25, below 500 by several games. But I'm on record as saying I think they're going to be the best team in the NBA from December 19th forward. Because I think that highly of what Morant alongside Smart, alongside Bane, Desmond Bane going to have another opportunity to take a massive jump. Jaren Jackson Jr. is playing for a contract extension that could be over $300 million if he makes all NBA. So he is very much interested in having a great season. I think that you're going to see a renewed Ja Morant. In their media day interviews, both Derrick Rose and Marcus Smart made it very clear that they're not there to babysit Morant. They're going to push him. They're going to make him uncomfortable. I think it's the very best thing the Grizzlies could have done. They already have their stars, right? Jaren, Bane, and Ja are probably 3 of the top 40 or so players in the NBA. They've got those dudes. They don't need another one. Maybe they wanted another one, like a Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby. Those types of guys would have been cool to have, but they got a guy who's going to help accentuate and build these young players. You compare it to Boston when Marcus Smart helped bring up Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Obviously, with Smart taking that role with these young Grizzlies, I anticipate a similar leap. So I think that they're going to be the best team in the NBA from that point forward. It depends on how slow their start is, in terms of seeding in a loaded Western Conference, especially a top-heavy one at that.
Well, just imagine how good their start could have been had they kept bronze medal World Cup hero Dylan Brooks on the roster, baby.
Got 39 on the U.S. Killing it.
Yeah. I look forward to him coming and really testing the integrity of the rims at FedEx Forum in Memphis when he comes for his revenge game and he shoots 3 for 20.
Oh my gosh, the bricks.
He could never. He's a changed man. Much like Kyrie Irving, Dylan Brooks is a changed man after this summer.
Both of those guys are just going to completely turn over a new leaf. It's 100% going to happen.
But it could happen because Jake believes that Zion Williamson has evolved and has grown, so that could actually benefit the Pelicans, right, Jake? So what are the expectations?
But they don't want him to grow anymore. Isn't it the opposite? They don't want more.
Ooh, shots fired again.
I mean, look, if you want to take him from like somewhere between 6'6" and 6'8" and make him 7 foot, that puts him on a Giannis level there. I'd be all for that.
I thought you meant like girth, I thought we were talking.
Just the evolution of mind and spirit.
Okay, all right. Sorry. When I say growth with Zion, I'm in a different plane, but that's okay.
So in my exclusive one-on-one sit-down interview with him, I had a media day to hear.
Always
media day.
plug it.
He said the expectations for the team were, for a good season or to win the NBA championship. And I think that's not necessarily realistic for the Pelicans here, but he's coming in with very much a different mindset. You can call it Zion 2.0, Zion 3.0, just bought more in than he ever has been before. And if he stays healthy, this team can be really good. And there's definitely a theme at Pelicans Media Day yesterday, Monday, whenever people are listening to this, that they know they have to win. Like they know they have to win. It's kind of a prove it year, a make or break year for this entire team. And look, there were some rumblings of would they trade Zion this offseason because of the issues they've had with him in the past. But if they go out and win, and there's enough talent on here, I think, to fight for home court advantage in the Western Conference. I don't know if they'll get that far, but they were first in the West last year for an extended period of time. They were top 3 seed for an extended period of time without Brandon Ingram as Zion carried them. As long as he's healthy, this team is going to be very good, very competitive. They're very excited about what the offense is going to look like with new associate head coach James Borrego, former head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, kind of revamping the offense a little bit. Everyone's just got this business-like mentality about them because they know they need to get things done this year. It's similar to what Nick was saying. You've got to get into the postseason, right? Like number one, that's the biggest thing, but I think you need to at least look competitive in a first round series as well. I don't know about winning a series because it is that hard in the West right now with it just being an absolute arms race, but their expectations are playoffs at the minimum, 6 seed or better. And I think that's going to be really realistic for them, kind of based on the approach that everyone's taking. And I think you'll finally see if and when Zion gets hurt in the regular season, which is going to happen at some point, it won't be like a season-ending injury for him. He'll be able to kind of come back from that sooner rather than later because of the new approach the team's taking.
Yeah. Now I'm going to ask you guys a question that doesn't deal with your team. Going to kind of ask you to point to another team on the panel. But if you look across our panels, Raptors, Pelicans, Grizzlies, Mavericks, Nets, other than your own team, which team would you say has maybe the quickest path to being a true title contender this season?
If Zion plays, I think it's the Pelicans. I think they're that deep. I know who I can look at their roster and say, okay, they're 10 players deep on guys that I would play in the playoffs. They have guys that can take leaps too. Trey Murphy, when he comes back from injury, can take a leap, and that could push him forward. If Zion's healthy, I mean, he's all NBA, and there's only a couple here that have all NBA. There's only a couple of all NBA players here. So I think it's probably the Pelicans just because of their depth. I'm supposed to say the Mavericks. I just think that they're a couple more moves away. They don't have the same kind of depth, even if they are more top heavy than the Pelicans are right now.
That's why I let you off the hook and said you don't have to say your team. Pick another one from the panel. So you're good, Nick.
With the Pelicans, in theory, I am with you, but I also can't, the if Zion's healthy thing. It's been proven that we can't count on that. And so I'm not going to go Pelicans. I think I'll probably go the Grizzlies. I think their backbone of Ja, Desmond Bane, who, boy, oh boy, I really wish the Raptors took 29th in that draft instead of Malachi Flynn.
Welcome to the club.
But Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., I think Marcus Smart's really going to help that team.
Desmond Bane wasn't in your backyard, right? At least Desmond Bane literally didn't play down the road from your franchise, and you had plenty of
TCU is not in the backyard, but yeah,
it's around the backyard. It's in the neighborhood.
Anyway, I think it's the Grizzlies. I think their star talent's incredible. I think the backbone of their defense with Jaren Jackson Jr., if he's on the floor, which he was not on the floor. People will remember when Canada beat the United States for the bronze medal at the FIBA World Cup. I don't know if people remember that or not. But Jaren Jackson, if he can stay on the floor, he's one of the best defenders in basketball. There's no question about it. I think the top end talent there makes it so the Grizzlies are probably the team here. But I guess Luka also kind of gives a team just an avenue to winning a title. I just don't totally believe that they're ready yet with that super young, set of dudes they're hoping will kind of be his next wave of great teammates. I think they're probably a year or two off. So I'll go the Grizzlies.
That is way too much hate on one of your own, Omax Prosper. How dare you? He's ready. He's ready right now.
Omax. I'm in. I actually think Omax profiles very similarly to OG Anunoby as a rookie, where he had a 6% usage rate, but was awesome on defense. It was just exactly what you need with other high usage guys out there. I think he's going to be awesome.
Except he's the size of Siakam.
What say you, Doug?
Yeah, I think you got to just go Luka and the Mavs. Between that and Kyrie and what they added in the offseason, if you get elite rim protection, let's say Lively is just ready. I'm not sure. He's super young and raw, but that's kind of exactly what they need. And what you said before about these low usage but defense first guys like Omax, who I wanted the Nets desperately to draft, and Grant Williams. Like those are just like the perfect pieces to add around those two other guys that really just could literally take all the shots and be super, super, super efficient. So I just think that team, I don't think that's like super likely, but if there was a team that could really exceed expectations, like come out of the gate where everyone really gets along and everyone's just playing the best version of themselves, that team, the Mavs, could be really awesome. It's fraught with peril with some of the other things that are going on.
No, you already said it's going to go well, Doug. You can't go back.
I do. I think the Mavs. I think they made every right move this offseason. Honestly, I think they just kind of nailed everything, and I do think it's realistic. I don't think they can win the championship, but I think they can. I think they're probably being slept on in like a weird way just because of how last season ended. But no, I'm really bullish on the Mavs.
I like it.
I think it's Grizzlies here because they're the team that's kind of done it before in terms of their record, right? Yeah, you're missing Ja Morant for the first 25 games here, but there's some depth. They know how to play together. They're well coached. As Joe was saying, they've made moves to kind of really go a little bit more all in and try and solidify some of that depth, I think. And I think when you look at their track record, it shows it, right? We've seen Luka do some things in the postseason, but I'm still worried about Kyrie Irving. I'm a little bit worried about the depth there. I think I just look at, of all the teams here, that I would trust the Memphis Grizzlies more so than any other one.
And I would probably have to say the same. I'd go with the Grizzlies, and mine would be a little bit less about the performance and maybe a little bit more about rounding this team out. So when you have someone like a Derrick Rose, who's very respected, and then you have someone like a Marcus Smart that's kind of, at 29, he's not quite young, but he's not old, but there's enough maturity. He was kind of that one of the hearts and souls of the Celtics team. I feel like maybe bringing him in to kind of settle and help a Ja Morant to mature, to help to do the same thing for Desmond Bane or even a Jaren Jackson. Those are sort of those intangibles also that can help you to kind of settle yourself and understand the importance of putting yourself in position to be a true contender with the Nuggets or with the Warriors or whomever, ends up in sort of that top 1 or 2 space over in the West.
Yeah, between the Grizzlies with Marcus Smart and the Mavs with Grant Williams, our team just took the heart and soul right out of the Boston Celtics. Like that's going to be a really interesting team to watch.
It's cool. They have Kristaps Porzingis. It's going to end perfectly for the Celtics.
A classic heart and soul guy that loves being the fourth option on offense.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. When he's actually available. So that'll be interesting to see as well. Unless we say, in Western Conference is kind of that quirky one as well, where they've got their 1-2, and I don't know if you'd even call it a 2-punch. I feel like it's the Nuggets, and then everybody else, I just feel like it's still kind of up in the air depending on how all of the new pieces and all of the shifting pieces kind of fall. But good talk, guys. This will do it for episode 3, the ultimate NBA season preview with teams that we're unsure of. To find out where all of the NBA teams land this season, check out Locked On NBA and get all 6 episodes of the ultimate season preview. See ya.